Hello and welcome to FPS Coach. My name is Rambo Kim, and in this video, I'm going to give you a few tips to help with your shaky aim. The first tip is to consider how much curl is in your fingers while you're gripping the mouse. So for example, right here, there's a lot of curl on my mouse, where the opposite would be straight fingers. So the problem with curled fingers, or one of the reasons why it causes shaky aim, is because there's less surface contact on the mouse. Whereas if I have a lot of my palm on the mouse, a lot of my fingers while they're straight, generally more surface contact means more stability because there's less space for the mouse to move. So if you are one of these players that have these curled fingers, try this. I want you to try curling your fingers to the maximum. So feel like the thumbprint or the meaty front part of the fingers are all curling and pressing into the palm. Now, some of you, this might feel uncomfortable or there might be some discomfort. So obviously don't force it if this is you. Everyone's joint health is different. But this is the feeling I want you to try. Feel like it's max curl and then drop your grip onto the mouse. And keep that same feeling where you can't really curl your fingers anymore. And this might help with your shaky grip because when you're at the maximum of something like this max curl, well, I can't curl anymore. So there's no room for the mouse to actually shake or wiggle around. While you're experimenting with this max curl, also experiment with the finger placement or how many fingers are curled. So for example, I'm gonna curl all my fingers except this pointing finger. So everything is curled to the max except this pointing finger, which I'll drop down. And now my pointing finger is actually at the maximum amount of being straight. So it's this concept of finding a grip where it's to the maximum. You're going to the max range of the positioning, whether it's curled or straight. And then again, when you're at the maximum of something, it can't go any more. So that provides stability and control and also with consistency. If you're one of those players that maybe have not so much curl, so it's, here there's still amount of curl, whereas this is max curl, right? So this is some amount of curl. Try experimenting with actually locking your fingers completely straight out. So right now my fingers cannot go any more straight, and then drop the grip onto the mouse and keep that feeling of your fingertips being extended out. And I know a lot of pro gamers that also play like this. And a benefit of this is that, again, when you're at maxed out, it helps with consistency, and also there's no room for the fingers to curl or shake on the mouse. Another thing to experiment with this concept of maxing out your grip and finger placement is I also know some pro players that have their fingers actually spread out to the maximum. So for example, these two fingers here, the feeling would be if you spread these out right here and create as much space as possible. And then you drop that down on the mouse. And then the same concept, because I can't actually stretch these fingers out more, it provides stability and consistency and control. And again, I just want to reiterate, if any of these kind of maxing out configurations with your grips and fingers is uncomfortable, please don't force it. That you want a grip that's natural for you and that works for your grip and your hand size. So you can play for long periods of time and not get pain, right? Another example of maxing out the stretch of the fingers is instead of these two fingers, it'll be the ring finger and the pointing finger. So these two fingers, if you imagine like these two fingers, the feeling of them being stretched out like this and then dropping the middle finger down, it doesn't have to be all the fingers that you're maxing out and that for stretching them or extending them or curling them, right? So it's all about trying to position your hand and fingers in a consistent way that eliminates any kind of shakiness or randomness. Another thing to try if you have shaky aim is to simply figure out how to place your hand and fingers with more contact on the mouse. So example of barely any contact, the least amount of contact would be my fingers towards the rear of the mouse, none of my palm on touching the mouse, and only my fingertips. So this is the least amount of surface contact, whereas if I palm my mouse and it's more forward, this is the most amount I can have. So experiment with cupping and placing more of the palm on the curvature of the mouse, and then also with your fingers along the whole length of it. And then the last reason, or the last two reasons, which are kind of related, is having too high of a sensitivity and then also having too much tension in your grip. So when you have too high of sensitivity, you naturally grip the mouse a little bit harder and a little bit firmer because you're protecting yourself from moving the mouse too much. So with too high sensitivity, any little motion is going to move that crosshair. So you're naturally just going to grip the mouse a little bit harder, which causes tension all in your fingers and your forearm and even up to your shoulders. So I would say if that's you, definitely experiment with lower sensitivity and see if that causes or creates less tension in your hand, which allows you to be a little bit more fluid with your motion instead of being all locked up and tense. Well, that does it for this video. Hopefully it was helpful in some way. If it was, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to stay up to date.